Welcome to the Mortal Realms, an Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your ally through the Stormvaults this episode are...
My name is Paul, and there's a little known fact. Did you know that Spider Fang can only become a war boss if they're bitten by a bunch of spiders? That's why they call that the four-bitten power.
I'm Aaron, and I've been told I remind people of the babe with the power.
And this is Eric. And Nagash must be Dwarden, because on Sigmar he be grudging. In this episode, we cover the lore of Forbidden Power, GW's latest advancement of the story of the Soul Wars. The Stormvaults have been thrown wide open, and the Mortal Realms are hosting their very own version of Storage Wars. Let's see what they find.
Paul liked it.
Oh, man, that was great. That is, so on point. I'm impressed.
How are you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Much better after I got that.
I'm still enjoying that. That's super good. Have you ever watched Storage Wars?
I have.
Yeah, it's
I
totally
don't admit
what's
it to
happening.
anyone. No.
Oddly enough, I have not actually. I just know the concept.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
So you put this in here to out Paul.
Yeah, basically. And mission accomplished.
Oh, I don't care. Anybody can know I like Storage Wars.
Yeah,
I go to
yeah,
garage
and now
sales
and
or
now
boot
everyone
sales, as they call them.
Paul, when I drive to your house, I drive by those storage units.
Yep.
I always think about that.
Yeah.
So how are you doing tonight?
Unless
Eric?
there's a Stormbolt. I'm doing pretty good. It's a busy start of the summer.
Yeah.
We've got the weather's not been terribly warm,
No.
but been out in the pool some. Been not my personal pool, the neighborhood pool.
Must be nice.
Nope. I mean, yeah, a bit of a pool rat when I was a kid. So it's nice having kids and having an excuse to go. Because when you don't have kids, you don't get to go to the pool really.
So you're saying you were a skaven?
Pool rat.
Got it? Nah.
I mean, I was a little on the nose, but I'll let you have it.
Here, a little on the snout.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm grabbing you by the tail here.
Otherwise, though, I'm working on terrain for Warcry because I'm excited for whatever that could be.
Sure.
And otherwise, I'm not really building much or painting much these days. Just busy. Just busy. How about you, Aaron?
I moved on from my corn, and I've started the Gloomspite stuff from Loon Curse. Look at this soul loon boss sitting in my case with nothing around
There's
it.
something like a Dettol case in front of us, and on the top shelf, in that 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot space,
Painting a picture.
is a single model, a loon boss.
Yep.
Which is a pretty fantastic model.
It is really cool. Yeah. No, I really like it.
Can I congratulate you on building a spider?
I'm building a spider. Oh yeah, there's one. No, I mean, I got that guy, but the scutlings are kind of not scutlings. What are they called? Grotlings.
Scutlings.
No, they're kind of
Yeah.
spider-esque. Also, look behind you is the spider tide thing. Their spell. So that kind of counts as so. All spiders all the time. People call me Mr. Spider, so everybody knows how much I love spiders.
I've actually built 0 spiders.
What?
I mean, if you build a certain number of them, you summon Paul.
It's true.
You did
Anyways.
paint.
I did paint. Yeah, no, I painted at one of the corn dudes with the contrast paints, and man, I am in love.
Super good.
Yeah, so there goes my one model for the year.
Nice.
I'll see you.
Done.
I win.
I'll
I
see you
win $1.
See you again next
Wait a
year.
minute, does it?
Paints?
If he does 2, do you lose?
No, I just multiplies.
Oh,
I only
okay.
said 1, so I get $1 for each model that he paints.
Double
Keep
win.
painting, Aaron.
Sure. No, actually, in fact, I was about to put them away. I'm like, all right, cool, that was a fun experiment, and I will wash my hands of this.
Yeah.
No, I like it. We've seen lots of few people posting stuff, and everyone's experimenting. And I was glad to see that. It looked great. And really too, the leather that you were able to achieve, was that snakebite?
No, it was the
Dryad bark?
the wildwood one.
wild-
Dried
okay.
bark is
That-
the old.
That's like the type of leather I'm usually trying to paint. So
nice.
that did a good job.
Yeah, no, I like it. Maybe I'll crack into it again. I don't know. I'm not making any promises.
No, you
This
don't
guy.
owe anybody anything.
Well, don't tell the bank and my student loan people that. Paul, what have you been up to? Tell me about your life.
I have been painting Stormcast
Ooh.
for my son. So I when I get new paints, I try and paint an army in order to understand how they work.
Sure.
So that's what I'm going through right now with the Stormcast. So it is an interesting experiment for sure.
Yeah.
It's making me rethink the way that I'm painting.
I mean, here's the question though: how is he ever going to appreciate that army if you paint it for him?
Well, I'm going to appreciate it. I don't care. He's already painted an army's worth of miniatures, but they're all just goblins. So
Yeah.
But
just goblins from you. That's absurd.
I started
There's
my
no spiders.
Fair.
I started my kids on Skaven. It's no.
You started on Noblars.
Noblars. That's it. That's Noblars. Even worse than.
Do they still paint?
I haven't gotten stuff out in a while. So without me doing it, they're not doing it. So.
Sure.
But yeah, it sounds like we've been super productive. Well, maybe Paul more than everybody, but
Well, that kind of happens sometimes. I just get fixated on an idea.
Loon boss, giant squid, right there.
I'm sorry. It's right in front of us, and I'm sorry for not acknowledging it to the extent that it deserves.
Staring you down.
But one of the fun things is the Stormcast army that I have is kind of a conglomeration of stuff that I have bought. So I'm going to theme it around a Stormvault. So that's what we're talking about today. But I'm going to have a Vanguard wing to go out and search for the artifacts that have been taken. And I'm going to have a Sacrosanct wing that's going to defend the vault itself. So I think that's going to be where the narrative of the army shows up.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you guys want to talk about Forbidden Power? The new...
Wait a minute.
I love talking about Spiderfang, of course.
Can we?
yeah, and this is a safe place. You have my permission.
Also, I do think there's a penumbral engine at my house because there's some of this that I think I read, but I'm not sure if I remember it.
Fair enough. I recommend writing notes about it after you read it because
Excuses.
that helps me remember all sorts of stuff. Anyways, cool. So let's talk about what this is. This Forbidden Power is an expansion, would we call it?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good thought.
An advancement?
Sure, an expanded advancement.
I think it's a lot of things.
A chapter? A new chapter?
All the above. Campaign, in a sense, too.
It does specifically say a Warhammer Age of Sigmar expansion.
Yeah, but I don't let them define me. I'm my own dude. So yeah, no, it's pretty cool. It basically it's I was gonna say it's not hot on the heels, but it's the next phase, the next step, the next chapter after Soul Wars, which came out about a year ago at this point, give or take, right? It was like June.
Yeah.
Which that came along with AOS 2.0.
Yep.
And it was a big that came with a big story element, a story campaign, a story component, which was pretty big and exciting.
As well as the winds or the magic malign sorcery.
Sure. Endless spells. Yep,
endless spells
exactly.
and such.
So let's maybe real quick recap what happened then, because without knowing that, this whole thing probably wouldn't make much sense.
3 steps.
Hit me.
I'm going to do it. I can name that history in 3 steps.
I can do it in 2 steps.
Son of a...
No, I can't. Go ahead and do it in 3 steps.
Nagash, long-time plan, Necroquake. His plans get disrupted and it sends a quake of necromantic energy throughout the realms. Unleashes magic in such a way that certainly the dead rise, but also sentient magic.
Malign sorcery, you might say.
Starts kind of pacing or just going all crazy around the world, around the realms. And lastly, as it brings us here, a lot of magic that existed to hide things, to cover things, to work in a certain way, was disrupted or destroyed. So we, in the Hedonites of Slaanesh, in the book about where Slaanesh is captured in our last episode, we talk about how the Necroquake busted a few of Slaanesh's chains. In this, we're seeing another result where the magical lore of the penumbral engines
Got
knackered.
Done it in 3.
Yeah. If we were to expand upon that, so
you're saying you can do it in 4?
Or 17, which is usually my forte.
Sure.
But
It's Paul's magic number.
when the Necroquake hit, right, we had all these undead things show up. All these spirits were released. That was the first thing, right? Second thing is
Eric's
we have
counting
these
right now.
endless spells that start showing up and consuming everything.
Yeah, I already got that one.
But the third thing that happened is the laws of magic changed, right? It's not like, oh, this spell doesn't work quite right. It's that everything has shifted. So we don't actually know how the laws of magic are working right now. So
This is
a side
true.
effect of that is that we have these things called enlightenment engines that were designed by Teclis that were changed into something called a penumbral engine, and those now no longer function.
Sure. Let's talk about that. Let's do that due diligence. So, great recaps on Soul Wars and
3. I didn't do it too. No, I said I was going to do it too.
And the Necroquake. Predating even that, back in the day, Age of Myth. the good old days, the golden age, Sigmar was traipsing across the mortal realms, doing what he did, basically trying to pave the way for civilization.
I think
That was great radio. I loved it.
He was skipping through the realms.
It was traipsing. I definitely got traipsing.
I imagine at some points he was like smashing mailboxes.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Like
taking his big hammer, taking Gollum Ross, and be like, "Screw you, postal service!"
Or like kids walking through the forest and kicking giant mushrooms and breaking sticks on trees.
Yeah, but for him it was like he was smacking like god beasts in the face and stuff,
true.
like and like subjugating.
Doing a bunch
animals.
of and guttural growls and being all like Paul
Like,
Bunyan.
they didn't have mirrors, so he did it like in his reflection in like a lake or something like that. He was just flexing at himself.
Yeah.
Like,
So we're talking about the Grand Alliance here. We're talking about when all 8 gods were basically on the same
nope.
page.
We were talking before that even, I think.
Yeah, I mean, though it could have been around the same time, or before, during, and after, essentially, where he was doing work cleaning up the mortal realms back in the Age of Myth, and so he found as he was either working with his pantheon or not, but that like he just shucks, I keep stumbling upon all these like mighty artifacts and things, like they just keep showering down upon me. What am I supposed to do with these things?
Well, I mean, to the point of when again Age of Sigmar came out, it was like a Dracothian woke him up and showed him the realms. To me, this is that episode, the flashback to, what did show me the realms really mean? It meant run around like beating up monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Went around, like smashing big grubs and crashing mountains and
stealing their loot.
This is a very visceral. The realms were not empty, right?
No.
There was a thing here. He found it. He started turning it into what we understand to be the Age of Sigmar, but there was all kinds of other beings, other gods, other races that existed before that. And he basically came in and was like, dudes, let's have peace. And if they weren't like peace, he'd like, all right, I'm going to smash you with my hammer.
The idea of like, again, the mythos of, Sigmar created the realms in his image. Right? It's very much, he destroyed the realms to fit his image.
Yeah.
Right?
And then he gave everyone a beard.
Yeah, probably.
That's a campaign promise I can believe in.
Right across from me right now. Sigmar, is that you?
Open another chamber.
The hell I can!
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. Although he's running around beating up monsters, he does find on occasion that there are some powers that he's not that he's maybe not able to beat, but it's better that he lock them away. So that's also the sort of thing that like he's trying to hide away. He's got this problem. Yeah. He's got stuff he's trying to hide from the realms. How does he go about doing that? So around this time when the Pantheon is I think exists, or in its early days, Teclis rolls up with a gift to Sigmar. Did he explain why? Like, why was he giving him this present?
So he was trying to elevate the civilization of Sigmar to a higher level. And so he gave him what are called enlightenment engines. Sure. And so they are simply engines that would be mounted within his great cities that would allow for more expansive thought, more understanding for the people that were within.
Sure.
Right? So it was this gift to say, hey, we're on the same page. I'm going to try and bring up your people closer to my level, right? Like,
ouch! Like,
right?
That's a real.
It was actually, it's a bit of a backhanded thing,
well, it's very elvish. That idea of like, I'm going to do this nice thing for you by giving you words to use. Can you speak the language? Well,
and he gave him the Sigmar. He didn't give him to Gorkamorka, right? He didn't give him the Nagash. Like, this is actually a salient point of the history, is that these were specifically given to Sigmar. They weren't given to Dwarden. They weren't given to anybody else. So
Teclis, you burning everybody. Good job.
It's a little bit like there's an interesting back and forth here. And
I'll give it to these guys because they have a nominal chance of learning, unlike the rest of you.
Yeah, you're Dwarden. You can't learn anything.
He's not real good at making friends.
But so what we're creating here is we're creating a reason for the Grand Alliance to exist, right? Instead of one big enemy, we have millions of small enemies. And the vast majority of them can be wiped out, destroyed, overrun, right? Consolidated. But there are these enemies that can't. So
and some of them, I mean, even enemies. Some of it is just like the realms being the realms are uninhabitable even to gods to some extent. Certainly not to the mortals that they are hoping to kind of thrive in these places. The magic itself has form and shape, and it might be a storm, might be a monster, it might be
To say it often has teeth. Yeah.
often has teeth, and so
Often
it's
has tentacles.
all their plans are to propagate their civilizations to one way or another, and the realms just don't. I mean, I'd say Gur probably is the way it's described as being very feral and very like mountains trying to eat each other. Maybe a lot like what the other realms were. But Gork Morka was like, no, I like this.
Don't you touch it. You leave it be.
That's my mountain that eats things.
Yeah.
Well, and if we were to compare this historically to an actual history, this is colonization, right? We have these wild lands, we have these wild civilizations. This doesn't fit my understanding of what it means to be a civilization. So he starts taking these things that are either super powerful and useful, even though it's not necessarily a thing that's useful now, or something that is too much to be left within the realms, right? So the creation happens of these things called Stormvaults. So they are either depositories or they are jails. Now, these jails are for things that cannot be killed, right? So one of the ones that's illustrated is called the Bitter Blood Caverns. And I only talk about this one because it's a super easy understanding, right? Of these huge worms that go about eating flesh and just
Super gross,
super big, super powerful. And when Sigmar smashes them with his hammer, every time he smashes it, it turns into 1,000 more. And they're smaller, but it's this overwhelming thing where he can't defeat it by means that he understands. So he takes that entity and binds it within this spectral, arcane prison, as it were. And now, in order for the arcane prisons to work, they need a soul to power these arcane prisons. And this is a pattern that has been developed now when we get into the prehistory of what's going on here, is there are things that are kept and there are beings that are kept. Some of them are for their will given, right? So a really good example is in the old world, we had this arcane hurricane that was siphoning off the magical energy, right? Those were people who gave of themselves in order to protect the world, right? And then the other example we have is those who are chained against their will, right? So this is
duty, duty to Sigmar and the Pantheon.
Yep.
Versus
You said duty.
just for you, buddy. Or somebody who's enslaved, something that is enslaved for its power to do something similar.
And that animus, that soul essence, allows these to function. Now, the really idiotic, point is that Sigmar is doing this alone. He's not enlisting the other gods in order to make this happen. He's just like, these things are pretty cool. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily trust all you later, but I want to keep them. So he makes these Stormvaults.
Sure, well, but isn't it at this point where he does work with a notable other god to help hide these Stormvaults away?
Once he realizes this is going to be a problem, right? Like, he's like, oh, crap. This is like, I want to keep these things. So he takes Teclis's gift of the Enlightenment Engine, and he gives it to Grungy. And Grungy is like, screw Teclis? Absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. And he perverts the magic that's in the Enlightenment Engine. So instead of creating and engendering understanding and knowledge, it creates this fog, this just
obfuscation of
obfuscation. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. So he perverts it to be pretty much the opposite of what it was. And he starts planting these penumbral engines, as they're now called, around the Stormvaults to keep them hidden. So in very layman's terms, you just walk there and you're like, that's a creepy place. I don't want to go there. That's basically what happens.
Well, that's an interesting. I love this story of Teclis giving something that has a power, and it says that Teclis doesn't even necessarily know the length and breadth of it, and Grogny is able to reverse engineer it, break it down, and change its purpose. And there's certainly some vanity plating. He instead of casting it in the metal of Hyash, he casts it in Azurite. And kind of makes it in the image of Sigmar. Sigmar's like, well, can you have it say my name on it one time?
Say my name, say my name.
That's $1.
Oh,
and then so he does that, and then the power of it is that almost felt more probably something like Ulgu. Like I imagine the power of Ulgu would have that ability to take, whereas Hish's knowledge and revelation, whereas that. But yeah, it and it even talks about the power of those machines in that. Yeah, sometimes it plays a trick on whatever sentience is there, like near it, to either visually mask it, to make it to where even Sigmar, in the Age of Chaos, having to leave into Azir, over time even forgot about these engines, and that it could go so far as to erase words about it.
Well, and that's how powerful these engines are, right? Even perverted against their own means, they are powerful enough to erase their mention from existence. Where Sigmar is literally struggling to hold on to like 4 or 5 that he's like, these are super important. I need to remember what these are. And he's just like, I can't do it. One of the really interesting footnotes here is that it doesn't explicitly say, but I think it kind of mentions that like Teclis might have left the Pantheon because of this. Don't know, but like maybe this is a thing, right? But one of my favorite parts is that Grungy's like, I'm going to mess with these engines. And it's like, Teclis is going to find out for 1,000 years. Awesome. I'm going to know for 1,000 years something he doesn't about his stuff, and this is going to be great. Yeah. Right? Like, it's such a Dwarden thing to do. Of be like, I'm going to hold this secret for 1,000 years just because it's going to piss you off, and it's going to be great to watch your face when you figure it out.
What's the term Grungy use? Elgi?
Yeah, Elgi. Yep,
Elgi
that's
magic.
An old world. Yep, that's a standard.
And he knows this is an interesting dynamic. He's talking to Sigmar, and he calls Sigmar boy. Right? There's this idea that Sigmar's a young lad. Well, and then, but that he knows. He also has Grugny's knows that Teclis is going to find out. Like he's not. There's no part of him. Like Sigmar's like, just we can't tell anybody else. And Grugny's like, I know Teclis is going to find out. Like you can't hide anything from Teclis, but it might take a little while, and he'll know it's me.
Yeah.
And we do get,
and I hope he does.
Yeah, and we do get we do get a little bit of that commentary also that Teclis, he sees it and he goes, Tyrion, can you believe they did this? And like this is not something we can forget. He's like, well, we got other stuff to do, but no, we're not going to forget it.
Yeah.
So there's certainly. Yeah, this is a setup. I think that there's other things going on in the Pantheon. Obviously, there's not a complete trust. Sigmar is a holier than thou archetype, and so thinks he knows better, or is the strongest, or whatever, and so takes it upon himself to be the judge and jury of these items and to know where they are and whatever.
And then lo and behold, like a squirrel, forgetting where its nuts are in the middle of winter.
Well, Squirrelmar.
Yeah.
I've got a contrasting viewpoint, and this might just be me, right?
Yeah.
I see Sigmar as very much a fatalist, right? He's like, this is too good to last, right? I need to hoard these things away for when I'm not going to be the one joining with the other gods to be able to do this, right? Like, there is going to be something that's coming that will threaten all of us. And it's not that he sees this and says, these are so good, I can't share it with anybody. I think he sees it and says, there's going to come a point when I can't rely on anybody else. And this is something I can rely on. These are powerful artifacts. These are powerful beings that can help me to try and pull it back when nobody else will be with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I'd agree. I mean, I think it's things like, well, I can't let chaos or the orcs get a hold of this, or mortals get a hold of this, because, some of the stuff can kill gods.
Well, yeah, they talked about one of them that's a hammer, right? Or is it a skull that can level mountains?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a battering ram or something that Gordrak got his hands on.
It's like, this is sweet. Yeah. I ain't going to let this layer out, right?
Because mountains are cool. There won't be any mountains. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly. If Gorko Murka got a hold of that, it'd be like, Gur, you moved. Poof. Right? Like, nope.
So, it does give us a better sense or another angle around the Pantheon, how they treated each other, how they felt about each other, what the internal dynamics are, the stuff they carried over from the old world, the new ways that it mattered.
Yeah.
why they were disputing or
Yeah.
you know, what role they play.
Well, it also talks about how much power that Sigmar had as the head of the Pantheon, right? Because these Stormvaults aren't just in random places. They're everywhere.
Yep.
They're in every realm. They're buried underneath all these places of power, buried in the middle of nowhere. Like, they literally are everywhere. So his power must have been immense to make these hidden sashes in every corner of the realms. And some of them are super tiny, right? Some of them are like, oh, this is a safe. There's a cool thing. Here, you have one thing, and you're going to protect that, and that's going to be great. And then some of them are like millions of things. And like, if we're going to talk about the Cloister of Ashes, right? That's a really good example of just how huge some of these storm vaults are.
Back off.
Well, and I'm introducing it so you can talk about it.
Stake your claim.
So I think another thing I'll say is the reason, I mean, the way they depict Sigmar, the reason why he's in charge is because nobody else really cares that much. Like Teclis and Tyrion, they
Wait
have...
a sec. Is that why I'm in charge of this?
Don't! He's figured it out! We gotta leave!
This is why you think you're in charge of it. No.
Is this Pantheon falling apart?
It's because of your conversion skills, obviously.
Because, you know, Tyrion and Teclis are distracted with their grudge, right? With the fate of elven souls, right, in the realms. Mm-hmm. They're more focused on the soul itself and that loss in Slaanesh. Yeah. Alariel, I mean, she cares about a realm, and you know, and to some extent gets lost in it. You know, it's just the being in the realm is enough for her kind of thing. The Gorka Mork, again, he's not like structure, organization, purpose. Those are not his greatest concerns. Sigmar is
he just wants to fight.
Exactly what
right.
I mean.
And he's got great, like, he's doing great. He's like, this is amazing. I get to fight god beasts. Fantastic.
And Sigmar wants to make things. Sigmar wants to order things. He wants to build things. He wants civilization. He wants more of that. Mm-hmm. And so when you've got somebody who's like, hey, I've got an idea for what this could be, and nobody else cares, and even Grungni's kind of like,
sure.
What?
Give me a job.
Yeah, give me something to do. Give me something to create. Like he's, so I mean, Sigmar is that guy who's like, hey, I've got a vision. Nobody else has a vision, and with in a vacuum, the person with the vision and the power to do it is going to do it.
Well, and he also is very much the embodiment of mortals, right? Mortal humans, short lifetime, fixed goals. We're going to do this, right? The elves are like, we're going to figure this out. It'll take us a while. We'll figure it out,
We're
right?
in no rush.
The Dwarden are like, meh, whatever. We're going to be here.
Spoken just like a dwarf.
Right?
Meh.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
And Gorka Mork is like, we're going to fight stuff. Stuff is going to be there to fight. And Nagash is like, things are going to die. Things are always going to die. I'm always going to have stuff to do. And Alariel's like, things are going to grow. This is great. I got things, right? Like, this is all doing great. And everybody has their own idea of what the world is going to happen. But as in previous incarnations, it's the humans that are driving it forward, right? It's the you know, element that we are supposed to understand as ourselves. These avatars of our understanding of how the world works that are really driving this story forward.
Speaking of driving the story forward, let's talk about some other stuff. Paul mentioned one of the vaults that were interesting. There was another
the Ashen Cloister or the Cloister of Ashes, yeah.
As we talked about, storm vaults can take many shapes and sizes. So I mean, it's like, you know, some of them are as small as an Azerite homestead, or like your personal house, right? Some of them are as large as cities, or span as big as you could think of something being in the Age of Sigmar. There are storm vaults that big. And so the Ashen Cloister is underneath Hammerhall, actually. And it's interesting that, like, there's a number of times where it might seem coincidental, like, oh, some of these are underneath, like, places that we already know.
Yeah.
But even though I imagine that there's like some reason they were built there, right? These vaults were built there, and then if Sigmar didn't remember that that's exactly where they were, like some part of his mind that was like, I got it. Why am I trying? We need to build there, right? And they build cities on top of them, and then armies to guard them. All that kind of stuff.
You're exactly right. Like he didn't put the vaults where the cities were. He put the cities where the vaults were.
Right.
Yeah.
And so underneath Hammerhall, actually, but there's also one under Hammerhall Gyra. But the one under actually, I mean, this is what I love about the Stormvault concept is that it just can be anything, right? That's the thing we love the most about Age of Sigmar. That can be anything. So here are some of the things.
Could it be a basement office / recording studio?
Oh, it could, and it could be a filing cabinet room, or a room of models.
What?
That were used to plot out wars in the age of.
We're looking for a name of the studio.
The Stormvault.
The Stormvault.
Okay, dubbed. This place is dubbed the Little Stormvault.
The Little Free Stormvault.
The Little Stormvault.
Live from Stormvault Studios. So here's a couple of the things. Here is the Blade of Fulmination. Sigmar smote the King of Ashes, but his sword was remaining, so it's sitting here in kind of a King Arthur.
Real ashhole.
Yeah.
I don't have to bleep that.
There's a type of Hydra trapped in here. There's a Ember Serpent, which is just kind of made of magic that's hidden here. There's a lake, kind of, you think of like where you've got the canals and all that kind of stuff, but the bottom of that thing is so deep, it's the abyss. It goes into the void or something, and the creatures underneath there are so mass and crazy. One of the cool things there too, and to the point Paul was making, in terms of willing servants to these. The 4 princes of Ashkarada, the greatest of the God King's fire sages, in death they serve him still and shall forevermore. And so there's this afterlife for these mages where they're in this ashen cloister to kind of help protect and guard and probably power the Penumbral engine here. So, and this one, I mean, it spans. Aksha has, or Hammerhall Aksha has the city, and underneath that it has all of the. They're not aqueducts; they're lava ducts, basically. And so, even below that is where this Stormvault is, and it spans the entire city. So just layer on layer on layer of mystery, and like you could do so much if you just.
You're thinking RPGs, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit of.
I can see the look. You got the RPG.
Well,
look
and we know that Age of Sigmar RPG starts in Hammerhall, doesn't it? Isn't that one of their first places?
Maybe.
Or at least in Actually.
I think they're on the Flamescar Plateau. Maybe. Okay. I can't remember. Or the Parch? Where's that?
The Great Parch. That's in a different area. It's not Hammerhall.
Different place.
But I feel like Hammerhall was mentioned as one of the first cities.
Yeah.
So, there's just so much that you can get out of that. So that's one of the larger Stormvaults.
Stormvaults.
So in layman's terms, right, we have dungeons in Age of Sigmar now, right? Like that's really what we're talking about.
And we always have
these
dragons.
Huge monsters, we have these huge treasures, we have these underground things, right?
Whoa. Not always underground. Let me tell you about one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a fancy one called the Orb City of Column Nexus.
I appreciate your faithful pronunciation.
Yeah, thank you. They phonetically spell it out for you. And this one, not underground, but it's a floating city of weird concentric circles and plates and stuff. Like it's a
weird is judgmental word.
That I shouldn't put my preconceived
it could just be odd.
I shouldn't project on it. But it's super weird. This floating city that kind of like spins around like the gears in a timepiece, and it's floating above the Beryllium Sea, which makes me think that it's probably in Chamon, is my guess. But that amazing floating city, that's not the only amazing thing about it. It's actually then surrounded by clouds of acid. So it's got a lot going for it. Really, it's an up-and-coming area. Get in while the real estate is cheap. And so
would you say this? So the atmosphere is kind of toxic?
Yeah. So while it was under the effects of the penumbral engines that were sort of protecting it, the Kharadron overlords would fly like around it. They'd give it a wide berth, and they're like, there's nothing interesting over there. It's a floating city that's like a weird clock. And they're like, we'll just avoid it. You idiots! But when it was sort of revealed from the effects of the necroquake, turns out everything in the air wanted a piece of it. Kharadron overlords, Grapag scholars,
Skaven.
like the Skaven in their weird floating blimps, and they're all sort of descending on it, trying to navigate these acid clouds, and then landing on it and trying to navigate the crazy mazes that are inside of it, which are guarded by clockwork automatons. You want to talk about an also prime dungeon crawl location? It's that place, because it's basically just one giant maze, and who knows what's inside of it, because no one's been able to like navigate to the center of it, which obviously is where all the sweet loot is. So that's my jam. High up in the air.
Kind of remind me at first glance of potentially a way to visualize it. This isn't how the art does it, but like Halo, just the video game, and that the series of like
They're down there in the
large
shop.
circles that would have just the whole Earth was just, or the ecosystem was just inside that ring.
Yeah.
That would be another cool way to think about it.
Also, like Ring World for you book readers out there.
What are those?
Never done it. Never heard of it. So that's. I mean, is there any more to say about the vaults?
Yeah, I think so.
What?
There's the crawling pits of Gorentia.
Oh, you want another one? All right, hit me.
That's right. So this is a storm vault that was just like, being all hidden, being all cool,
As
minding
you
its
do.
own business, as you do, right?
Feeling
and then
pretty,
when the
being
necroquake
hidden.
comes on, feeling pretty, might fall down later. Here comes the necroquake, breaks the enchantment, and it falls into an arachnarok nest. So now there's a storm vault with all this junk, right? But you got to fight off some arachnaroks to deal with it. So
I would never.
fair.
That's actually where the battering ram was.
That's exactly right. That you can level mountains with. So, who is it?
Gordrak.
Gordrak, right?
Right there.
Now has the hammer, and he's gonna go level some mountains because he's got a plan.
Sure, because those mountains are always making fun of him.
Only thing stopping from leveling the whole place is his 4-inch movement.
Well, and there's an interesting point here that I'd like to just point out, right? Like, so Hammerhall actually is on top of the storm vault. Hammerhall Gira is on top of the storm vault. Like, all of these big beacons of civilization are on top of storm vaults. So Sigmar has based his entire fledgling order civilization on top of nuclear bombs, as it was, right? So it really illustrates how to him he has this like fatalistic, if I can't protect this, it's not worth having, right? Like, even the realms are not worth having if I cannot protect these storm vaults.
We're watching Chernobyl right now, so that's actually very terrifying.
That's fair.
Well, but you also think about like if you needed to reach for that thing, you're you're defending Hammerhall Akshi, and you're like, okay, this isn't going well. What's my last thing that I can do? I'm going to reach into the storm vault, grab the big weapon, and use it, but as a last resort.
Yeah.
So there's, and man, there's so many ways to think about. I did a lot of underlining when I read this, and there's just words. These are just words. So close your eyes.
I'm glad I
This
didn't.
is a mood board.
I'm gonna give you.
I'm glad I didn't loan you my book.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I know, right? That was the first thought. I was like, you underlined in a book.
I went underline your book. Here's Arcane Automata, Relic Weapons, Forbidden Spell Lore, Chrono Fields, Treasure Seekers.
Talk a little louder.
Here's Seraphon guarding ziggurats. Hey, for you old world lizard players, there you go.
Leave us alone now.
God killing weapons, Zacrosian mind stones, things formed from pure nothing, guardian spirits, beasts of the void. There's so many things in these.
Isn't our hobby awesome?
Right, like, I mean, this is amazing. Like, the narrative potential by just this section. We haven't even actually hit the narrative of this book yet.
No.
We're
Despite
just
my best
talking about the
efforts.
background.
I'd argue that it matters not.
And it just has so much potential. It has so much explanation of exactly what it is that we have here, and it's awesome. I mean, but because the Necroquake has messed with this penumbral engine operation, right, and they don't really work anymore, and everybody knows that they're here, Sigmar himself has plunged his entire civilization into war because everybody knows they're there now, right? Like, so the Caradron are like, you've left this for how long, right?
Dibs.
You don't own this anymore.
Finders
Well,
keepers.
Yeah, so these reactions, there's a ton of reactions to this, right? It's kind of tabloid fodder. It's the Ponzi scheme, right? Has been unveiled. like Sigmar's in trouble. Like everyone's like so at the god level, like we said, Teclis, Tyrion are like, oh snap, what did they do to that? I recognize who did it too. Grunny, you're not getting out of this.
And he's like hiding behind a curtain. Like,
Ilariel, I mean, this is like he dug up her gardens to put this stuff in there, right? And so she's what?
Yeah.
What are you doing? This is my sacred place, and you put these here. The Caradhran are like,
Finders keepers.
Scourge privateers are out. I mean, this is treasure hunting.
Sure.
This is dungeoneering. This is there's scouts going out to just find this stuff. Like, where is it? Who can find it?
The Deekpen are like, how can we use these to steal everybody's souls?
This is waiting outside the Warhammer store on Warhammer Day to get the tokens that are only available on that day.
Sure. Get out. By the way, can one of you go do that?
Yeah.
Excellent.
We'll see what we can
That'd be fantastic. This won't come out until after, but yeah.
So it's I mean, it's oh gosh, one of my favorites was the sea elves.
Yeah, Deepkin.
Deepkin, yeah.
Looking at, they're like, oh yeah, there's treasure, but man, the penumbral engine.
Oh yeah, that's what that was. Yeah.
Like, there's two parts of that. There's like, one, we could be hidden, and two, it can purge our memories.
Sure.
Like, just that idea of like, they're trying to get away from the sensation and the memories of Slaanesh. Like, could we just like go into like a deprivation, like just
burn it away?
Just burn it away, and like, let's not, and we'll just be in bliss.
Yeah.
Like, there's just some just cool reactions to finding out about this stuff.
Well, and we have motivations for a bunch of armies that didn't necessarily have the best motivations for why they'd be fighting. And they have some solid, awesome motivations now for fighting battles around these Stormvaults.
Like what?
Well, just like the Caradhran Overlords are like, oh, we're sellswords. We kind of like, we're merchants. Money is everything. That doesn't really go well with being like, I'm going to go fight a battle, right? Because, well, what happens if your ship goes away, right? But if they're like, hey, there's this stuff and it's money and I need to get it because it's just sitting there and it's free and the code says I can take it, right? That's a whole lot more believable scenario for me for a Caradhran Overlord battle than like, I'm going to come down out of the skies and fight you in a battle because there's a thing.
Well, certainly not a battle of passion.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they're gonna protect something. They're gonna be hired for something if they know the odds are well. But yeah, this is it's a salvage operation. It's there's so many ether things that they could harness that ether into something. I'm sure there's a Stormvault full. Like, what if Sigmar found a bunch of Urgold, put it in a Stormvault so the Fire Slayers couldn't get it all?
Well,
I'm remembering a story.
Crazy would that be?
There was I think, where did I read this? There was once a vault that was full of both Aether Gold and Urgold at the same time, and both the dwarf factions had to fight each other after. Where did I read that from?
I think it was in the book.
Was it in this one?
But
I also just read the Fire Slayer.
I don't. That penumbral engine at my house.
But just think about that for a second, right? Like if Sigmar had a Stormvault, and he filled it with Urgold, and he filled it with Aether Gold, right? So he filled it with the power of the Caradhran, and he filled it with the essence of the Fire Slayer's god, right? Has Sigmar betrayed the Fire Slayers? That's what
I was just saying.
Exactly.
Thanks for spelling it out for everybody.
I wanted to.
In layman's
but I mean that idea of like, I mean, him hoarding things that aren't necessarily his, There's this is a type of thing that you can play with it to your heart's content. You can write a narrative. You can decide what's in your Stormvault. It can be anything.
Well, in any place in the realms can be important, right? Like that's what Stormvaults have allowed to happen. You don't have to have a city. You don't have to have a civilization. You just have to have a place, right? And that's a really cool narrative hook. It's also really cool, just like match play scenario.
Right on. There was another interesting Stormvault.
Not another one.
Yeah, there was another one, and it was called the Midnight Tomb.
Really?
Yeah, and there's quite a bit said about this one, and maybe we spend some time talking about it.
Well, the book certainly does.
Yeah, it sure does.
A little bit.
So the Midnight Tomb was set in the Styx region of Shyish. This is a region that we've actually heard before. I think we might have talked about it once or twice in some of the books or other things that we've chatted about. It's So we talked about Shyish and how it's oftentimes almost predominantly set up in terms of like a series of afterlives. Whenever a living civilization like conjures up an afterlife, it apparently just like exists in Shyish. This is one of those afterlives where it's actually where some of the like forgotten like death deities, like those that are like waning in power, they go off to just like die. Apparently, it's like the afterlife for gods.
Like American Gods. That is Stygics right here, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't read American Gods, I'm sorry, but like, part of the plot of American Gods is that we have these gods that are waning because the belief in them has stopped existing, and Stygics is where those gods go in the mortal realms, where it's like nobody believes in me anymore. I have some power, but I need to go somewhere to die. This is where they go to die.
Lay down and take a long nap, perhaps.
Exactly.
Until someone starts believing in them again. But it's a pretty harsh landscape. It's a continent surrounded by the Dwindle Sea. So these gods are dwindling, how aptly named. And I think at one point we might have talked about how this is actually where Nagash himself fled to back during the Age of Chaos when he was defeated at the battle. I think it's the Battle of the Burning Sky. Basically.
That sounds about right.
That sounds right. Is where like his Mortarks like carried him off and like took him to Stygics.
Because Battle of the Burning Sky is where he did not come to Sigmar's aid, and then Sigmar chased him down, destroying a bunch of stuff in Shyish, and I think he's in Stygics after Archeon kind of comes in and devastates.
Sure, yeah, okay. So I might have the battle wrong, but that is, I think, where he goes to, like, after he gets beat up, like, Archeon cracks him in the skull, and so his Mortarks, like, carry him away into a bunch of, like, backdoor, like, realm gates to like...
Well, and this is the north part of the stable part of the Realm of Death, right? Like, when we get to the outside, there was a really cool little thing where it says, at the edges of the realm, that's where these new underworlds come from. Like, that's where they create themselves out of the essence. And as they become more believed, they move towards the center of it. So like as they become more and more powerful, so very viscerally it illustrates Nagash as the master of the realm of death, because his realm is the most central realm within it, because that's where the nadir of Shyish is, and that's where he's drawing everything to him. And speaking of Nagash, there is actually a rumor that underneath this lake that you're talking about, Lake Lethis, that is where the sarcophagus of Nagash is. So when his Mortarks brought him and they had him rescued, they took him down to the sarcophagus, and that's where he recovered.
Gotcha.
Right?
You know what it made me think of?
What?
Because they talk about the Lord of Death's like sarcophagus, Davy Jones' locker. That's what it made me think of.
I miss Davy.
Oh,
sad.
Not her, Davy.
More like Davy. Who?
I know, but I'm still anyway.
So they paint a little bit of picture. I like how they're using a lot more maps, and they try to like flesh out the locations quite a bit. So I like how this Stygics is actually fairly populated, despite its.
I always, from the description in Undying King, I always thought it was like just like a pocket realm, similar to like Valerial's.
I thought so too. Yeah,
like it was just not a place you could go, but this is very much a place you can go.
Definitely. Yeah, it's and all sorts of people are going there,
or where people went.
Sure.
Or both.
Sad.
They go and went.
Well,
they go.
It's got a reaver port of the Karakathos. There's a lodge lands of the Ulrung Fire Slayers.
There's a ton of mortal settlements in this place.
A Canaanite Citadel. A realm gate for Deepkin, like under the sea.
Railway.
Flesh Eater Court has a castle there somewhere. And then there's also this Deific Mons. Yeah, exactly. There's this Deific Mons, which is a mountain. Harkening back to some, ancient days where there was this like tower castle on top of it, where they thought like a bunch of demigods and like titans kicked it all the time. But it's like the major like geographical feature of this area.
So if I'm going to pull out of the narrative a little bit, it's Mount Olympus, right? It's Mount Olympus in the Realm of Death.
There's a different Mount Olympus. Like there was a mountain where like the Pantheon was actually kicking it, and it wasn't this mountain.
Well, but in the Realm of Death.
Okay, maybe the Death's equivalent.
Because
Mount
this
Olympus.
is where they say that this is where the gods of death would come to talk about what was going on, right? Which is a really
is that a sweet metal
this was
band
your
name?
this was your grandpa's path.
This is really fleshing out the Realm of Shyish a lot, because not only does it explain how these subrealms come into being, not only does it explain like how power is gathered in this realm, but there's also like they have meetings, they have summits and conferences to talk about how they are actually managing it. So the belief in the afterlife not only creates the sub-realm itself, but it creates a
Bureaucracy.
god. And this god has his own sentience, his own understanding. And to the point where he can leave his own sub-realm, go and talk to the other gods and be like, so, what are we going to do now? How is this going to happen,
I
right?
hate networking.
It totally, yeah. It's like dead networking. It's like, hi, that's a clammy handshake.
That's redundant,
Great,
Paul.
this is great.
All
Well,
networking.
here's your question, Aaron. I mean, this is
Uh-oh.
where do you go to find the statistics about who's got more followers?
Ooh.
Where's the data?
Where's the
this is where
spreadsheet?
the data happens.
I suppose that's true. You gotta read between
At
the lines.
these gatherings, comparing sacrifices.
I guess.
But-
Right on.
So,
Well,
Killed it.
this is
This is very much like what one of those meetings would be like. Somebody say something like clever, and everyone would be like, "Yep."
well,
and they're like, you killed it. And everybody be like,
Right.
because you can't really kill anybody. Get it? It's
But
a pun.
I did.
You did. That.
So this is the city of Lethis, right? So what particularly
Right.
is interesting about the city of
Oh,
Lethis?
sorry. Sorry. We're back to the city of Lethis.
Sure. Okay. Well, no, I mean, we really haven't talked about Lethis. Let's mention, yes, there's also the city of Lethis there.
Yeah.
And it is on, coincidentally, Lake Lethis.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we're narrowing it down. We're focusing more and
And
more where the story's going to
think
take us to.
Now the way we get into here to Styx, the way we know more about it, or Sigmar got into here, was a battle, the pushing the Great Pretender into here. So there's a in the Realm Gate Wars, Sigmar and the Anvils found this place through smashing through the this Slanesh Pretender god, and then kind of like, oh, what's this? So is all of this stuff like the Reeve Report and stuff after that? Is this after the Realm Gate Wars into that period of time, or the Soul Wars, where we get all these ports, or were they there before?
I don't. It didn't say specifically. I bet you some were before, some were after. Like I bet you some of these are ancient strongholds that existed maybe from the Age of Myth, or some of them were maybe made or founded after the Age of Chaos and after the Realm Gate Wars. But it doesn't say one way or the other, though.
Cool.
But yeah, so the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, they forged sort of a beachhead in the area. They cleared out one of the Slaneshi pretenders, and from one of his greatest defeats, they planted a city right on the shores of Lake Lethis. Paul wants to say something.
This is a super random point, but like, it's called the Great Pretender, right? He's pretending to be a god that is dead. So it was just a really cool little narrative hook to be like, the Stormcast are here because they went to go drive out a guy who's pretending to be a god that's missing, right? Like, so a god of the dead god.
If you guys want to hear more
Super
about
cool.
Slanesh and the pretenders to his throne, listen to our last episode, He Knights of Slanesh at Battletome.
Or you could look it up on Amazon Music. They have some great music, The Pretenders.
Sure, it's true. So it sits on the shores of Lake Lethis, which is also pretty interesting. The lake isn't just a lake. When is a lake not a lake? When it's a magical lake that steals the memories of anybody who falls in, which very reminiscent of the Deepkin, who sometimes hang out in this lake, actually.
Yeah.
Seems like it was made for him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and like, to be honest, when I was reading the background for this, it also reminded me a lot of the background I wrote for the Gibbering Dome, because it's all about memory and losing memory, and like how in my background I wrote that you ate parts of this like void stone and you would lose some of the memories, and there's also that benefit where you can lose some of your memories intentionally.
Sure.
But if you fall in, you're lost, right? Like, you can't even remember who you are, and all your memories are gone.
Feeling a bit lethargic.
Oh, let it go.
Let it go.
So let's talk about the city. See, that was a trap you fell right into.
It was.
So Lethis is a pretty solemn place. It's a mausoleum-type city, which I think is... we're kicking it in Shyish. I'm sure almost every city is a mausoleum city there. And they actually... a lot of the residents worship the goddess Morda, which is an old ancient goddess of the dead that, rumor has it, escaped the clutches of Nagash.
I want to hear more about this god.
Well, she was an ancient deity who, rumor has it, escaped the clutches of Nagash.
I don't get it, because Mor was a god in the old world, and now it's Morda. So I want to hear more about it.
I don't have any more to give you, man. Like, I just told you everything.
So Mor was a god of the dead in the old world.
Yes, I know.
Ravens, he was worshipped by Empire. So this is a reintroduction of a really cool kind of just interesting free people's interpretation of what it means to be a god of the dead. And it's not Nagash, it is more.
Sure. I have a garden of more somewhere over there.
Exactly.
And they hope or they think that this, like the protection of Morda, is actually what's keeping like the undead at bay, like away from the city.
I feel like there's an animal that really like sticks to this area, right?
There's an interesting dynamic here beyond even just the raven.
Yeah.
So it's referred to as the bleak raven as the herald of the god Morda. But the anvil's there because again, we're dealing with reality that ghosts are real, right? We're dealing with reality that death magic is real.
Demons are real.
Honestly, I still don't believe it.
So there's this death god who supposedly escaped the grasp of Nagash. So there's a lot of respect and there's a lot of and for the anvils of Heldenhammer, they pay their respects to it. They think about it. There's almost a worship, I guess, type behavior. And the devoted of Sigmar in this place are kind of like, well, I'll allow it as long as there is, also a mention of Sigmar or practice or ritual to Sigmar. So it's this weird dynamic where the humans are kind of overseeing the Stormcast, or there's just a enough political power to where there's seems like there's a little bit of conflict.
Which is rough because like even the Stormcast are like, you don't understand. Like I've met Sigmar, like he's cool, but like this other guy is like, you don't tell me who to worship. Like me and Sigmar are like this.
Well, and the other thing is because he's sending the anvils of Heldenhammer, right, or the anvils to Shyish, right? These are the souls that Sigmar took from Nagash that have been reforged into Stormcast that he is now sending back into Shyish.
Yep.
So this city itself is like the height of, I don't know, pride. What do you call it? Of Sigmar
like
to be like
he's taunting Nagash.
Exactly.
What's more Shyish than Lethis in Stygics? I mean, come on.
Can't be beat.
So one quick, again, just side note, right? This is my opinion. This is the AOS version of the Tower of London, where you've got these really somber headsmen in this jail where they kind of keep everybody together, and there are these ravens that signify it. So anyway,
never heard.
It was super cool.
Quit trying to make it British.
I'm kidding.
It is British.
I've heard
there's nothing I can do to make it more British.
Cool. What else? I'm going to talk about other interesting parts of Lethis.
Yeah.
For instance, there's the Vale, which is the main realm gate there, and it actually is a realm gate to a wide range of places. But where it goes depends on the phases of the. I'm going to say the moon, but it's probably High Sigindel.
High Sigindel.
Yeah. So it's one of those, it's one of those fancy realm gates that go to a different place depending on what time of the day or time of year.
In my day, realm gates went to one place and it was uphill both ways.
I prefer my realm gates to only go to a place half the time. Otherwise, it's turned off.
I bet both those realm gates exist in the Mortal Realms. Just going to point out.
Yeah. And so this one goes to Azir when Sigindel is at its apex, when it's at its highest peak. So like it is a point of like reinforcement or a connection to Azir, but only sometimes. And I wonder if that will come into play later.
So you're telling me there's a Stormvault, a great city, a host of civilization, and a realm gate directly to Azir. Mm-hmm. No, I don't know why anybody would attack that.
Yeah,
it's got everything.
Well, and
not
the
a target.
anvils
Not a target.
of the anvils also have their Stormkeep here.
Yeah.
Right, and there's this huge graveyard that is just this huge open space that they protect. They don't allow anybody else to come into, and that's where the Vale itself is. Right.
Upon punishment of death.
Upon punishment of death, exactly. I mean, you're in the realm of death, whatever. I die. Oh, I come back. Crap, I came back again.
What are you going to do,
You're going to kill me again? I'm going to come back again. This is my afterlife.
And it's literally the Vale, the realm gate is a bone arch with cloth, like death shroud cloth hanging in it. And evidently, that's just kind of this cool idea too. It doesn't have to be like, I imagine the cloth like bellows and you walk into it and you just disappear. It like just sweeps you away.
Sure. Yeah. And Lake Lethis is the main source of food as well. Like there's fishers that are.
So this is iocane powder. They build up immunities to that lethargy, but they use the lake's water to help them like dull memories and from traumatic experiences or whatever. So that's
Sure. And people can come from from all over to all right, I've got this traumatic thing that I want to forget. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go drink my sorrows away in Lake Lethis.
Yeah. So
Also the name of my children.
What do you think Lethis water alcohol? Like, think about literally something that you're like, I want a little edge on it, but this will really do the trick and drown out my sorrows.
It's probably not alcoholic at all, but you'd forget that you weren't drunk, and so no, you wouldn't be able to hold anybody accountable for it.
It's absinthe. I mean, come on, it literally kills brain cells. Come on, this makes perfect sense. It's absinthe.
Does make
makes the heart go fonder. Exactly.
Or so after it erases your memories, would you just call it absence?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But Nagash is totally okay with the city existing right in the middle of the heart of the realm of Shyish.
Perfect.
Right? Incorrect.
Go ahead, guys. Go ahead, hang out there, Sigmar. Gosh. So yeah, I mean, Nagash is seething. The dispossessed have nothing on Nagash. Ever since we've heard him talking about anything, just in the Realm Gate Wars, dude does not let go of anything. Yeah. So Sigmar's first, he broke the Pantheon or whatever, but then he started stealing souls, and he started stealing actual souls that were already in Shyish. I'll just take some of those too.
He's never going to notice.
He's never going to notice that. The best and brightest of Shyish. And then on top of that, trapped some of his stuff in these vaults, in his own backyard.
And then proceeded to found cities in, right? He set up a tent right in his front.
I love that, he made a storm vault, and he's like, I gotta keep this safe. And then he's like, oh crap, I'm just gonna figure it out. I'm gonna build a city on it. This is still mine. Right, this is still mine. I put it here, right? This is still mine.
And then has the gall to say, Nagash, why are you so mad at me?
Yeah, exactly. What's the problem, man? This is my stuff. Well, I left it here.
To be clear, Sigmar does not care if anybody else is upset with him. He does not act like anybody who's well, they'll be upset. What are they going to do? But Nagash is holding quite the grudge. He's got a one-track mind.
And some grudges can only be held for so long before you have to act on them.
Yeah.
And thus leads us into the story of Forbidden Power. So basically, Necroquake hit, revealed all these Stormvaults. Yep. Nagash realizes that there's this midnight tomb that we don't know much about yet, but we'll talk about more, underneath the city of Lethis. And he says, all right, fine. This is on my doorstep.
I mean, let it go.
No, you will not let it go. I already made that joke.
Oh, yeah. But now we're applying it to Nagash, and it makes so much more sense.
It's much better, you're right.
When the penumbral engine fails, Nagash hears something from the midnight tomb.
Right.
And he's like, oh, crap. That's mine.
Sure.
Right? This is somebody who used to owe allegiance to him that is trapped in this midnight tomb, and he's like, no. You take my souls, fine, right?
Well,
you
not,
do this,
not
he doesn't say
fine, right?
He doesn't say fine.
Also
but,
not fine.
You're taking, basically what this sounds like is, you take one of my Mortarks, we're going to have a problem, right? And he's like, this needs to be mine.
It's probably a Mortark level thing, but we'll talk about that too. But so all his eyes drawn to Lethis, and he says, all right, well, here it is. I'm waging war on a number of fronts right now, but I'm going to bring in one of my Mortarks, Lady Olinder, Mortark of Grief, and I'm going to give her this singular mission to take that city down and free whatever is kicking it on the inside. And so he does. He calls her into court and says, hey, I want this thing. And she's all right, cool. She tips her cap and goes on her way. She gathers her Nighthaunt forces. She sets up sort of a beachhead or a foundational point at the top of that deific Mons, which everybody already thought was kind of haunted to begin with. Well, then again, it's Shyish, everything's haunted.
Yeah.
But yeah, yep.
Ride of the Valkyries style, just
yeah,
green light surrounding this mountain, constant turmoil.
Some Swift Talk agents go to check it out, and only one makes it back, and out of their mind, talking gibberish. But the way they describe it is that there's enough ghosts there to cover the entire, block out the entire spire, which is, from the pictures is, let's say it's a mile high.
Sure.
And they're just swarming the entire thing.
It looks like it's clouds and stuff, but oh, nope, those are just ghosts. Yeesh. Yep. And so from there, they launch their attack, right? So they come rushing down the mountainside. It leads right over the Lake Lethis, and so they're rushing airborne over the lake, just swarming and attacking all the boats and the peoples that are out fishing on the water, which is actually the subject of one of the little short stories that they published on one of their Forbidden Power weeks. Are they still going to do those? They made it sound like it was going to be like a thing, but then it sort of petered off. I don't know. Nobody here knows. Honestly, I'd be the person to ask, really. But it's the story of Cursed Waters.
You should have made that a dialogue just between you and your other you.
Yeah, sure. I don't know, Aaron. They said they were going to do more, but then they never really did. We'll have to wait and see.
I appear to have no inner monologue.
Yeah.
I'm having problems controlling
Well,
the
Aaron,
volume of my voice.
you're looking really good these days. Nice haircut. Hey, thanks, man. So they're swarming Lake Lethis, and if you haven't done it, go check out the Cursed Waters story, because it's actually pretty interesting, and it harkens back to those old Malign Portent short stories, which I loved. Honestly, some the AOS fiction is almost always at its best when it's short and condensed, and you can really cram in a lot of emotion and feeling into it, which this one totally did. You get a perspective of the people on the boat seeing both the night haunt swarming down the lake, basically this huge tidal wave attacking folks, and then the quote unquote saviors that come rushing out of the water alongside them. But this is where the Deepkin forces of this area rise to sort of face off the night haunt. So it's
there's kind of a big call at this point, because the forces of Lethis see this coming, and they call in for reinforcements.
Yeah, exactly.
They're signaling to Azir. They're putting out to the Caradhran fleets that are ransacking a vault over to the right. They're going so far as trying to see if the Carrion, one of the Carrion kings, what is the Castle Drakmir, if they'll come over and help them out.
Sure. There's the fire slayers in the area as well, calling in those favors. So basically, they realize they're about to get hit in the chin real quick, and they need to call in every favor that they have to come to defend the area.
There's one super cool little detail that I loved about this whole first assault, where the Night Haunt come in, and then the Deepkin do this counterattack, and then the Stormcast come out. So the first wave of the Deepkin are the eels, right? And the eels are like, we're gonna take care of everything. But then the second wave are the thralls, and the thralls are like, hey, look at all these fishermen in the lake. They don't have any memory. Hey, let's just steal their souls. Nobody's gonna know anyway. They can't even remember the people. So they just start harvesting the souls in the middle of the battle, because they're like, we need these. These are awesome.
Opportunistic.
Exactly.
When you're always battery half full, you take every opportunity to charge back up.
Look, if you're playing a game of StarCraft, you need to be able to focus on the battle, but then also your base back home. You got to be harvesting your resources. Someone's gonna get that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of what the orc said. All done here, from the old Warcraft.
Sure. Ready to work.
Ready to work.
That's right.
What you need doing?
Yes, my lord. Yes, my lord.
That one.
Yes, my lord.
Yeah, that's pretty
As
good.
you wish.
Should we just do Warcraft voices?
All right, we're changing to a original Warcraft 1 podcast. It's just
They're remaking Warcraft 3,
done.
actually.
Yep.
Pro
Better graphics.
No, that's StarCraft. Light 'em up.
crossing your streams.
Yeah, that's true. Man, honestly, if we should do it, you guys want to do a different podcast? I'll talk about that
Right now, right here, in the middle. We're not going to finish the story. We're just going to talk about Warcraft.
And it's going to be about Warcraft and lawns.
Yeah.
Lawn parties.
I'm going to talk about that nonsense all day long. All right, yeah. So the Deepkin show up. It's the Iron Rock forces led by King. I'm like, what is this? Ekravir, Black Tide. They rise up and they meet the Ghost Tide. They charge right into them. They drive the Night Haunt back to the northern coast away from the city. But they take a lot of heavy losses, and it seems like they can't hold this position for long. But then the Stormcast come rolling in, led by Lord Celestant, Vandergool, and so they do their best to hold off the Night Haunt, but they just keep coming, and the forces are too large, and so they realize that they're going to have to double back and head back to the city and sort of retreat back to the safety of the walls of the city and defend their position from there. So this is kind of a cool scene where the Stormcast sort of pave the way for the retreat in lockstep, and they just go line by line by line, from Liberator line to Liberator line, like shield walls and stuff. And so it really goes to show the efficiency of, I mean, in my mind, particularly the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, very unemotional, very methodical in their motions, and they're doing their best to cover the retreat of the the humans, and then also the Deepkin as well, so they can get back to Lethis.
I mean, if you think about it, they're basically like the poise of like White Kings and skeletons, and like that stalwartness, but in Stormcast bodies.
Yeah, geez Louise.
I mean,
and if the general dies, they don't just like crumble. Like they just hang out.
Yeah.
So it's around this time that like the retreat starts off pretty effectively, but even it starts to fall apart. Like you can hold up your shields all you want, but like if you're dealing with ghosts, they're going to start to find their way through the shield wall. And it's around here that one of the local Fire Slayer lodges also join in on the retreat. Like they were kind of running back to the city themselves because they weren't able to like face off with the Night Haunt, and so they joined forces with the Stormcast and the Deepkin to like cover the retreat and make everyone's way. I mean, generally safely back to Lethis.
Cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's the timely arrival of the Greyfjord Lodge. And so if you know anything about Fire Slayers, the Greyfjords are known as the lodges that will like work with anybody for like any price sort of thing. Not any price, for a high price, but they're not necessarily known for like having high ideals or necessarily moral compass. They'll take money from anybody if it's appropriate. So going into this, maybe that clues you in on the sort of Fire Slayers that we're dealing with, right? Like, it's not the Volstags. Anyways, they're the main ones.
The better ones.
The better ones, right? Like, every faction has, like, the good ones,
yep.
And then the subsequent ones.
I feel like there's a backstory to what's going on at the Fire Slayers here.
Tell me about it.
Because the Fire Slayers were paid to defend Lethis.
Sure.
But the townspeople are a little bit behind on their payment. So there's some grudge going on here of being like, hey, dude. But Vandergool is like, hey, you know what? We're going to figure this out, and we're going to like get you some sweet payment going on.
Well, it sounds like they'll pay you double, like if you come like help us protect the city.
Exactly. And he's like, oh, okay. Sounds great. We're doing great.
Well, it's more, I wouldn't go straight to that. They're more like, all right, fine, you better pay us double because we're not going to forget the fact that you have not paid us yet. Like, we'll fight now, but that doesn't mean we're cool. Give us our money.
I want my $2.
Can I have
help
4 beers?
Me help you.
Yeah, exactly. So they're pretty miffed. It's not a great relationship. And so they were able to make it back to the walls of Lethis and are able to regroup. And so here's where they sort of gather and take stock of the forces that they have available to them. So like behind their walls, which are like, thrice blessed or blah, 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 any number of folks have come through.
Aether cannons.
Yeah, all this jazz. So like it's a pretty well fortified city. Paul raised his finger like he wanted to say something.
So this is a cool line. Additionally, in the aftermath of the Necroquake, Etherius, who is the Lord Ordinator in charge, had directed dispossessed work crews in the creation of intricate sluice works within the masonry, which were subsequently filled with raw celestium, the stuff of heavenly magic.
Oh.
We've got Azir Realmstone flowing into Shyish, into these buildings, which is, I don't know if that's the first time that we've had 2 Realmstones going against each other, but to me, this is a super significant moment in the narrative.
Well, I know that having that much of any Realmstone is going to have some effect, but
sure.
Yeah, that's it. And in this case, what do we think about it? It's probably a very it's blessing, right? It's holy. Azir is holy kind of energy or whatever. Yeah. So it's that ultimate anti-ghost.
Kind of reminds you of Glimpseforge in Battle for Glimpseforge.
Yeah, where they're burying the relics of the saints.
Sure.
To guard the walls. And
if you want to listen to that, go listen to our episode. Oh no,
lost it.
You lost that episode. Aaron, why do you keep bringing it up every time Soul Wars comes up? So this city now has a wide range of defenders available to it. Like Paul just mentioned, the Lord Ordinator Arthurius. He's got his dispossessed work crews. He's got devoted war priests and the Ordinator conclaves underneath him. This is home to the Blackshore Guard, which is a Free Guild handgunner regiment. There's the Sacrosanct Chambers of the Grave Brethren and the Sepeternals. I'm sure that probably means something. Now that the Iron Rock Deepkin are here, they are under the protection of the Soul Scryer Namos. There's an Excelsior War Priest, Pravus Morningstar. There's the Lord Celestant of Vandergool of... what was their chamber? There's more anvils. I can't remember what they're called. Plus the Runesun Greygar Greyfjord, which is that the Fire Slayer guy I was just talking about before. There's the Admiral Kolstarn of the Quadrant Overlords, which are sort of based in this area as well. And then a person who we will name later, a big name. We'll make his presence known later in the story. So Look at that
this
list
is
of people like defending this city. Like,
exactly. It's not just one race. It's not just one. This is a conglomeration, right?
Sure. And it's interesting to note this wide range of races are happy. Oh, so very glad to defend the city. Oh, by the way, maybe we'll get closer and closer to this new Stormvault that was discovered.
Which is super. Yeah, exactly. So like the Deepkin are like, I'm gonna get pretty close to this engine. See how this engine is working. The Caratron's like, we're gonna bomb super close to the Stormvault. It's gonna be fine. And the Grey Fleet are like, hey, the storm, like we're gonna defend in the center of the city, right? Like right near the entrance. And so the only people that are like actually defending the walls are the Free Guild, the Stormcast, and the Devoted. And they're like,
what more do you need, man?
Yeah, and then they get overrun pretty much immediately because it's like, what the heck are you going to do against like this massed onslaught of Night Haunt and Deadwalkers?
Yeah.
And this is the other thing, is that it's not just the Night Haunt. There's also this huge mass of Deadwalkers and Necromancers that are here as well. So there's an alliance on both sides.
Yep, exactly. So fast forward. The city's now under siege. So the Nighthawk roll up to the doors. The Deadwalkers roll up to the doors as well. There's hordes of zombies surrounding the city, and they're just getting lit up by the cannons that are mounted on the city walls. The Karajan Overlord ships are running strafing movements against them, and again just blowing them up with their guns. But there's the numbers are so large such that it hardly even matters, and they start sieging the walls. They have these big giant bone siege tower constructs, and so for every one that gets dropped, like another 3 rise up to take its place, and eventually they do take the walls. They plop their low gangplanks down, and the walls themselves are overrun with just like that, with dire wolves and other like zombies and stuff.
It's like 3 minutes to midnight, right? Like everything is going to be totally fallen. And you know what? It's like 3 minutes to midnight for this realm gate as well. Right? So like in no time at all, it's not going to lead to Azir. It's going to lead to somewhere else.
Sure, exactly. So they need to settle this quickly while they still have that gate open, so that if they wanted to get like reinforcements or access to Azir. So it seems like the defenders are kind of holding their own, but they're slowly losing ground on the walls, and the gate seems like it's being taken. So like who's guarding the gate right now is some Stormcast, but then it's also the Fire Slayers, and they're like, Fire Slayers defend the gate. That's exactly what they said. That's a direct quote. And the Slayers are like, yeah, no, that we'll do our job. We'll do what we're sent here to do. Surprise, no, they don't. They betray the Stormcast, and they stab them in the back, and they flank them on the side. Because
what jerks?
Yeah, what jerks? Because it turns out they were coerced or outbid, I guess maybe, by the Night Haunt. So at some undetermined time previously, some haunted specter approaches the Rune Sun and sort of gets into his brain and tricks him and turns him against the forces of order.
I was going to say, Lady Olinder didn't offer more. She just gave him a lot of grief.
Oh, that's true.
I feel like we're talking about Soul Wars again, where we have like one person that was talked into betraying the. Why do I keep bringing that up? I don't know.
That's how the Night Haunt operate, right? They get into your head and they and these guys especially. I mean, there's a lot of talk in the Night Haunt about the betrayers and the people that are kind of turncoats, and so this is if they can find that as their way in, right? That's how they break ranks. That's how they. I mean, that's psychological warfare, right? That's part of their MO is the screeching, the amassing, the say, hey, we're coming, warning you, all this kind of stuff. So
and also stabbing with ghost swords.
Stabbing with ghost swords.
So
I mean, if you're the only army with ghost swords, why not stab with them?
Yeah.
So this 1 minute to midnight, and somebody comes through the realm gate.
Dun, dun,
And who is
dun,
it but the Celestin Prime? So this is kind of cool, where he's clothed in the Anvil's finery, and his actual personality changes, right? So it's not just that the armor changes, but the actual being inside of it has some change done to himself as well. Because there's only one Celestin Prime. He's the first Stormcast that was reborn.
I've gone to a tournament. I've seen plenty of people have Celestin Primes. Like,
it's all historical reenactments.
Okay.
It's all different times, so it all works out.
What if there's Celestin Prime 1 and Celestin Prime 2?
What if there's Celestin Optimus Prime?
Then he's in disguise.
And he's just semi.
But what if it's like
Prime?
But I agree. It's one of those things where there's a lot of heroes that Games Workshop puts out that are like, oh, these are Hammers of Sigmar, and you're like, oh. But I wanted Knave to be in my army, but my army is anvils, and my army is, something else.
That's why you paint it like the box, like I do.
Yeah. But the Celestin Prime, everyone usually paints the Celestin Prime like their army, like fits it in. And this is the first time that, I always assumed he could just probably changes his armor. Doesn't belong to one chamber, so just his armor changes, whatever. So this is just, it is cool to see kind of what does that actually mean? What does it look like?
Well, his voice changes.
Yeah,
He's like this gravel death aspect to him.
Do you think he's like mocking them? He's like, hey, I'm the Celestin Prime here to help you, and I'm all grim and emo, and I've been in the Shires for so long. It's been a long time since I've been to the beach.
Is it like when you do like a D&D voice where like
we weren't? I can't believe you brought that up.
you have to do the episode in your D&D voice now.
So basically, we get to the point where
D&D all the time,
where the Greyfeared betray the Order forces, right? And so everything is lost. The militia start breaking, right? Like Vandergool gets killed and his soul ascends into the heavens, right? And it comes down to we've got this fight for the mausoleum because the eels are able to do some damage because it's this wide open space with the cemetery. And then we've also got the entrance to the Midnight Tomb as well, which we know that both of these places need to be defended. But the Midnight Tomb is the one that Olinda is going after, and she sends Kurdoas to go attack the mausoleum itself. Right?
And so that's where the Celestin Prime goes first. Like just that
Exactly.
he just sees that fight, and so he rushes to the aid of the Grand Mausoleum, which is, like we said, the Stormkeep of the Anvils.
Is it Grand Necropolis? Is that the
Necropolis, yeah. What did I say? Mausoleum? Yeah, Grand Necropolis. Which I'm sure there's a mausoleum around it, in and around.
It's all.
Yeah, just the whole darn thing.
It's lousy with mausoleums.
That's pretty good. So the Celestin Prime rolls up with a retinue of prosecutors at the tent, like his angels, like his avenging angels. It's cool as hell. And they start just routing
the Greyfeared.
Yeah, the Greyfeared. The Celestin Prime rolls up to the Runestone who's in charge of everything, and says something awesome. Paul, find the quote. It's basically like, you've been judged unworthy.
Thou is damned, son of Grimnir, he spoke, in this life and in all others.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
and crack that dude's skull. Off his head, off his shoulders, probably.
Yep.
A lot of.
What is the Lord of the Rings GIF where it's like something's back on the menu?
Meat's back on the menu,
Yeah,
boys.
But here's the thing, right? With that, the hammer of the God King descended, crushing Runesong's skull to bloody fragments. As the Fire Slayer fell, onlookers saw a halo of purplish flame envelop his body, which was then drawn into the head of the Great Shatterer.
Is that always the case? Does he always steal stuff into the hammer?
I don't know, but he's like, you're mine, right? Like, you are my vengeance now. It's pretty sweet.
It's pretty heavy. So the Fire Slayers are routed, and so is Valentian's forces as well. He's forced to retreat, and the walls of the Grand Necropolis stand firm. Oh, and that's something we didn't even talk about. Like, for a split second when the Fire Slayers were winning, they had a whole retinue of Magma Dross just breathing magma fire like on the gates, and it was melting it down. And then they had a bunch of runesmiths roll up and start pounding runes of like breaching, and so like the place was gonna drop any minute before the Celestin Prime shows up, which is kind of cool.
Runes of breaching.
Are you thinking of breaches? Like breeches?
There's a few points in which like the illusions of the Stormvaults and like the bringing down of somebody's walls, to me is like it's kind of getting caught with your breeches on, like your pants down.
I knew where your mind was.
So there's a number of references here that feel very much like breeches down.
Sure. I get that.
Speaking of the Stormvault, so we've saved the mausoleum, but the Stormvault itself is only being defended by the Sacrosanct Chamber at this point. Right? And
probably.
Against Lady Olinda, they really don't have a chance.
No chance.
So the tomb is broken open, and her forces start running through.
The Siege of Sorrow.
Right? And so she releases these endless spells, right? So in the box set itself, you get Laoshan, the Soul Seeker. She releases that, right? Like all of these individual spells, the bridge, the shards, they're all released, and everything just seems completely lost. Yes, we've saved the mausoleum, but the tomb is just being completely overrun. and with no allies left to call, what is going to happen to the city of Lethis? Wait.
It's going to fall.
Is there no allies left to call, Aaron?
Are there no allies? Are you talking about the Flesh Eater courts? Is that
That's
what you're
right.
getting at? The Tenebrous court?
Yes.
They, I'm going to use the air quotes here, come rushing to the aid of the city, but sometimes the aid is worse than the disease, so to speak. Tenebrous Court comes rolling up out of nowhere. They themselves think that they are these holy, like, cavaliers, noble cavaliers, riding on the city and purging it of these, bat-winged, monstrosities, saving the innocent townsfolk. And that may be true to some degree, but then they sort of fall victim to their own bloodlust and start just ransacking the city itself and attacking anybody they can get their hands on. And so it's up to the forces of order, who recognize the help that this Tenebrous Court can offer, and sort of wrangle and corral them and put them in positions that will help them and not, kill a bunch of innocent people.
Right.
And so they do the best to herd them in places where they're gonna be useful. It serves as a minor distraction. Honestly, just serves as a way to introduce the idea of having what's it called in the game where you have other armies,
mercenaries.
Yeah,
and allies.
mercenaries. It's just a way to introduce
Which I think
Flesh Eater courts.
to me it fits totally.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of hemming and hawing when this came out, but I mean, you just need a good story, right? It's all it takes, is a good story to make this legit.
Sure.
Give me a good reason, and that's fine.
Yeah. So that's one
And a new anecdote in the realms is now the phrase "like herding ghouls."
Sure, like herding ghouls. You heard it here first. You heard it ghouls here first. That's one aid that they find available to them. Also, when they're sort of navigating the tunnels and vaults of this midnight tomb, another way the storm cast, the sacrosanct chamber that's sort of holed up there, finds a way to find unlikely aid, is they open up a lot of the vaults and start using some of the weapons that they find there.
Yep.
So there's this Geistbane sword and the shield of the Pale Knight that they use to lend strength to the forces there too, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, I guess Paul already mentioned, but they are at the same time, the undead are also opening up the vaults and freeing all sorts of the residents that live there, the Soul Seeker
Laoshan, and Olinder specifically unleashes Laoshan and is like, find this person, right? Find this being for me.
This, when you were making a joke about Storage Wars,
Never.
but this is they're like. It's like if the show Storage Wars were people trying to break locks
Was an actual
to
war.
grab stuff out of there and then fight each other with them. So this is more of a Storage War.
I want to watch that show.
I was gonna say,
That show sounds
I
awesome.
want my war joke to land better because that's solid. Storage, it's a storage war.
Yeah, it is a storage war. That's why I laughed. It was great.
Audience, you guys get it. And Paul gets it.
We're going to assume that when you said it the first time, everyone else were like, yeah, totally.
Yeah. I just want Eric to laugh at my jokes.
I do.
All right, so cool. So eventually, later, Olander does roll up to the final destination of this tomb, and it's a giant jail cell. It's like a floating ball of nothing that is housing this great creature or whatever that she was led to, and she starts casting a spell. It's like a bunch of black rose thorns, like vines, and it starts prying open the vault.
Well, let me ask you guys, if we do a flashback to did they not describe how this thing was captured?
They were talking a little bit about how it was pulled into this hole.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
just a second. I just wanted to see I'm just confirming that they did talk about
Yes.
how this thing's captured, so that I could just what was another just cool imagery were Gargants wearing Sigmarite armor and shields. Like siege, Gargants, but on the side of order, trying to shut these gates on this thing, right? Trying to shut the vault, trying to help trap this thing. So I'm just, again, Age of Myth, back in time, Gargants were on, wearing holy armor. That's cool.
Sure.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and most of them were sacrificed to trying to jail this thing, but one of them was left out. And lo and behold, in Soul Wars, there was a Gargant saint that was buried as one of the things that was protecting the city.
Oh. In, Lethis?
No, not in Lethis. In
Glimpse Forge.
in Glimpse Forge.
Gotcha.
One of the walls was defended by the bones of a giant.
So it wasn't just here, but in that one, there was 2 Gargants wearing armor. One got crushed, and then Sigmar came in, hit him with Galmaraz, knocked it out for a second, and then they closed it in and it sucked sucked the Gargant in with it. So a few sacrifices.
Oh,
Yeah.
You got if you're gonna sacrifice a few Gargants if you're gonna make an omelet.
Sure. Yeah. That I don't want. Do I have to eat
If
that
you're gonna-
omelet? I don't want that.
I don't think they would fry up really well.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to yuck your yums, but
Or yolk them.
You throw a yolk on his face.
that sounds yucky.
She's
Alright.
opening it up,
So
opening it.
yeah,
cracking this egg.
and who shows up to
I brought
come
it back.
confront her?
Finally, the Celestin Prime, right? He was busy.
Optimus Prime.
Give him a second. Like, he had to clear out the Stormkeep was probably not more important, but still,
No.
it's just where he came first. So he comes rolling up and chases her down, basically, because she's sort of within the tunnels of this Stormvaults, and they go toe to toe. They, as I'm so prone to say, they 1v1 each other.
Yeah.
And it's a mighty battle that lasts like a paragraph.
A little
honestly.
grief relief.
Sure. Oh god, I wish I had some grief relief right now. So they're going toe to toe. They're clashing their weapons. Like, she's got the Staff of Midnight, but seems to like hold its own against Galmaraz. But she cheats. She's a cheater, and she calls in one of her other like handmaidens, and they have this fancy hourglass full of the Shaishin realm stone, gravesand, and they smash it. And his like armor, like his being the Celestin Prime's armor, just crumples in on itself. It rusts, and like, dude straight up dies. Like, he's dead.
Yeah.
Like, he's gone.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he reforges, but
Yeah.
like, boom.
She gave him grief.
Yeah.
Have we
And it
seen
killed
the
him.
Celestin Prime die yet?
I don't think we have. I haven't read a lot of the early Realm Gate War stuff, but I don't think so. I think this is number 1. Oof. I'll say I wouldn't have thought like Olinda would have been the one to do it.
she's low key tough, right?
Yeah, I guess. Sure.
She's not Archeon, but she gets the job done.
Right? Yeah, I thought maybe you go to toe with Arcane, but probably not.
Do you mind if I read the part here?
Never.
As the first forged angel's form broke apart into forking bolts of lightning, it spared one last horrified look at the onyx orb above. In a blinding explosion of green light, the prison burst open, scattering clouds of swirling geists and sending sacrosanct warriors sprawling across the cold stones. And the artwork for this encounter is amazing,
Sure.
right?
Though I'm distracted by it when you said forking bolts of lightning.
I know,
Is this a good place? Like, reference? Like,
I was
fork.
also I was thinking that was one of the first swears in the Soul Wars. The new swears for this time age is fork and bolt.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, that's literally the last sentence of the story.
Done and done.
So what does it mean that when he gets reforged, it's forked lightning and not single bolts of lightning?
I don't know.
I don't
I think it's anything.
I think you're reading into that.
No.
Lightning always forks,
Sure.
unless you're saying is that it hit 2 different places.
If there was more than one soul. If the Celestin Prime is more than one soul. I mean, he gathered the Greyfeared leader into his hammer.
Okay.
There are more than one
I
soul.
understand.
I
I
see.
understand what you're saying. I
So
still don't think it. I don't think it's anything.
That seems
There.
that could be more something like Torglug turning into Tornus, where if he's capturing somebody and reforging them, that could be a thing.
Sure.
But
I would like to think they could put that much thought in their choices of words. I don't think they did.
it's just forking lightning forks.
Forking lightning. Paul, it's just forking lightning. If I keep saying it, I'm going to slip up and I'm going to swear. So I got to stop.
So she, I mean, what's unsaid is that she's victorious in this space. Mm-hmm. She might have more battle to fight or whatever, and she might get chased out. But for all we know, she's been victorious. She's opened this vault, and whatever's inside, the previous follower of
Nagash.
Nagash
Contagious.
is now free.
Yeah.
Who's that? Who'd it?
That's what we should have done. We should have preemptively thought of who our predictions were going to be.
Oh, we can do that now, though. We can preemptively do that now.
Can we talk about the options, right? Like, that we might know of,
That's what we're talking about.
right? So,
Predictions, options.
I mean, former Mortarks that we could say is Krell is one of the...
four Tarks.
Yeah, but do you think like he's a shadowy creature that looks like that picture in the book?
Well, in the Mortal Realms, anybody could be anything, and he's a necromancer.
So in the book, the picture has almost a feline look to it with, kind of a short nose. It's not a skeletal look.
I thought it was more of like a demon.
Almost
type
like
looking.
a third eye, and some, writings, almost as writings on his forehead, but is monstrous. Is like bigger than a giant. It's more, bigger than any model that's on the table. So in this regard, I would say it's probably some sort of Shaishian magic beast, like a some elemental form. It kind of described tentacles in some cases, but I feel like that gets overused or overdescribed in a lot of this writing. So it could just been shadowy stuff, or whatever. But
I'm ambivalent in terms of like what I want it to be, which is to say between whether I want it to be a previous character or a new character. Like I don't really know how I fall on that, but I think chances are it's probably something new. Like people want it to be someone we know. My money's on it's probably something new. But I'm happy to be wrong. Like that's
in the end times there was like a couple of Mortarks that were never named.
In fact, there was one that was called the Nameless, right?
Right.
Yep, the Nameless one. There's also the first vampire as well. He was basically the inspiration for the Flesh Eater Courts. The first vampire was this feral, tainted
There's all sorts
being.
of people who are listening who know that or yelling at
exactly. But he was basically this monstrous incarnation of what it meant to be death.
All right, well maybe, yeah.
So,
because he looks like he could be like a not a vampire per se, but like a feral monster version of a vampire.
Well, to me,
there are no fangs.
Yeah.
On this guy,
he looks like a demon prince.
Can you see his teeth?
Yes, you can see his top.
Okay, then touche.
The top of the jaw.
Not a vampire.
This
is very good radio.
Yep. So I mean, I think so. I would love it to be some sort of construct. I would love it to be. I mean, there's kind of the carvings on the head reminded me of like a statuesque type thing. I know it's. I mean, when it was trapped away, it's a thing of magic. But I like that kind of idea that magic solidifies and what. Kind of like the Wardroth beetle of Valerial, where it's solid and then motes and then solid.
There was way back when in White Dwarf, there was a Tomb King character. Which this is just incidental. He's not defined by his Tomb Kingness, but he was a Tomb King Lich Priest who gained power by binding himself into constructs. And so there was a narrative set of rules for him to be bound into a bone giant. And then he could lead other bone giants, and bone giants became like a special choice in his army, etc. So that's quite possible.
Definitely not him.
No, not at all. But
just joking. There's that rumor that one of the newer Death Battle Tomes is going to be a Soulblight.
I think it would be really cool to take a new direction with Soulblight. I mean, even the term Soulblight is different than vampire. Is different than blood sucking, and even Neferata and some of the others. Like there's more of a sense of even more like the thralls of the Ideneth, where there's a lack of something that they need to replenish or such. I like the idea of Soulblight being something other than vampires, or just
something more. I think it's always going to have some component,
right? But I mean, it is something where I am leeching from somebody else, creating something, a thrall of, or my something that serves me or whatever. To me, vampire could be more, or Soulblight, the vampire side of it could be more about how they act, their social structure, their staying in the shadows, being vindictive, living for immortality kind of thing.
Their soul blightness can be more than just what they're pigeonholed into.
So not having fangs would not be a big deal.
Sure, and it's one of those things that the range is so small right now that if we were to go the route of having a soul blight battle tome, you'd have to expand on it. You'd have to add more to it because there's not enough out there to
Yeah, there's literally the vampire on zombie dragon,
Blood Knights.
But those are not, they would not continue because those are fine cast. Yeah, right.
There's the thing that doubles with the
the Terrorgeists, or not the Terrorgeists. Sorry, the Vargeists.
Well, there's that, but I'm thinking the chariot giant ghostly chariot. There's the double for that. The Blood Coven or something like that.
Coven Throne.
Coven Throne. That's what it is. So not much, right?
Nope.
So if they wanted to add more to it, I reckon they would expand on the concept.
Yeah. So I think there's a way you could go there for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh man, mini scrying phase.
Hey. So yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing is even with this image, the end result could be anything, right? Like this image does not necessarily. This could be like, hey, there's a cool monster and we made that, and then later on we'll figure out what it turns into after the magic dissipates and it takes its old form or whatever.
Sure.
I don't think they are beholden to whatever this image is, unless they may have it all figured out.
But this image, like I think maybe you're sort of alluding to, like this image could be just the soul of the thing that then gets shrunk back down into whatever it's like real life form is.
Well, and the other thing is that there's not necessarily a model for this, right? This might be the narrative hook going forward.
Sure.
But this could just be a representation of an idea.
Yeah. Like, well, there's no God Beast models, right? And the God Beasts get featured
That's
all the
right.
time. So.
If there's no model, the artist is given a little bit more leeway to just draw something cool and epic, and that looks pretty freaking cool and epic.
Both cool and epic. All right, so let's talk about the ramifications to Sigmar and his pseudo pantheon that he has now. So Sigmar lost. Like he did not accomplish what he set out to, which is to defend this Stormvault. So as he's stewing over his, and plus his Celestin Prime also like got as well. So he's stewing over this defeat, and who should come knocking on his door but his best friend in the whole world, Teclis, who's not necessarily there to gloat, but guys, he's kind of there to gloat.
He's kind of there to gloat.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think gloat is like, is just the tone that is a part of his talking.
Yeah, sure.
Like gloating is just part of
But
talking.
like, it's like, dude, you just lost. Maybe I should give you some time. No, I'm gonna come and talk to you. Be like, hey, dude,
I'm gonna poke
I
that
know
bear.
what you did.
Yeah.
Right. Like, he knows, right? He knows what happened, and he's like, yeah, right now, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna come and taunt you right now.
And he's like, look, and here's the deal. I know you're gonna try and start like a war. I'm not necessarily going to help you with that. I'm not going to send my forces along to just get demolished. You're on your own, basically.
Yeah.
And so Sigmar takes, I guess, quote, that advice to heart and says, all right, fine, if you're not going to help me, I'll do it on my own. And he calls his equivalent of calling his banners. Says, all right, like we're going to go after it then. And so he gets ready for this next phase of this grand war.
I mean, was he ever really looking to Teclis to help out after like a millennium of like not helping out?
Probably not, though. Teclis does make the comment like, "Oh, I bet you want to use my golden boys," which is funny because Sigmar's guys are often golden boys. He's like, "Nah, like now's not the time. Like maybe later, but not."
Are the golden boys like the golden girls, only the boys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which one is Maud?
Like geriatric, adventurers.
Well, that's
with a very specific perspective.
I knew what I said. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was.
Did you just mansplain the Golden Girls? Because that's what I feel like just happened.
Is it mansplaining?
No,
It's
it's
to another
mansplained the
dude?
golden boys. Golden boys.
But basically, so the cliffhanger here is he calls his folks to war. Like he calls a war council. So like ostensibly that's the next thing, right? Like that's what's coming is this next phase of the war.
I mean, there's an obvious, right? Like he's calling all of his banners. Open another chamber.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean, like, if you call all your banners, you've already done everything you can, right? Like, it very much feels like that's what's going to be happening going forward to me.
Aren't they in war?
Yeah, I mean, it's endless war. The
repercussions are certainly like all of these things are concentrated now. Right? So there's like these pockets where you can go and like get a bunch of really good stuff and power can escalate, or like power in a space could escalate really quickly. Somebody could, like a Barak comes in and finds a certain vault and changes their dynamic, right, between the other Baraks, right? So there's some danger of like, even in order, there being some power dynamics that shift like crazy. Chaos, similarly, there could, like, when we talked to the parallels of nuclear war, there could be bigger, nuclear war in the realms is, the Necroquake happened. Nothing's going to be as big as the Necroquake.
Whoa. Don't let GW hear you say that.
Yeah. You just try and do another Necroquake. But again, if something blows up like a whole corner of a realm, like there's 17 other corners of the realm. But
what shape is that?
It's a rhombus, diagonal.
Gotcha.
Is a non-regular.
But we're here like all the time.
Pretty regular.
So you could have these big sweeping battles where something just comes in and destroys whole like lodges. Right, this lodge gets wiped out. That Stormhouse.
Why'd
gets
you
wiped
point
out.
to my office when you said that?
I mean that right there. I'm just going to wipe that shelf of books out.
But don't.
That's a lot.
They're out of print.
Yeah.
So I mean the having these big items just means there could be just some pretty epic things that happen back and forth and a lot more ebb and flow in the tides of battle.
Well, and this is very much the epitome of kicking the can down the road, right? I couldn't really figure out what to do with these things. I'll just go bind them in prison. And so Lethis, right, the Midnight Tomb has been broken. The entity within has escaped. But even before we even got to Lethis, the Bitterblood Caverns, right, that god beast, the worms, those have already escaped, right? Like, there are now these ticking time bombs all over the realms where anything can release anything. And one of the big points about this story, right, like, number one, Sigmar lost. And he didn't lose slightly, he lost terribly, right? He sent everything he had, and he doesn't have any more, right? One of the big points of the plot was that they were like, hey, Sigmar, the realm gate's open, send us a chamber. And Sigmar was like, don't have one. I'm already fighting everywhere. I don't have anything to spare. I'll send you the Prime, because that's all I can send.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, like, he lost the battle.
Uh-huh.
But I think the other things that are on his side are that he remembers where they all are. Like, he's got to he knows where the most important ones are. Probably he has that strategic advantage, and at the very least, he could probably, if let's say half of them have been discovered by not chaos and not death, there's probably a good chance that he can salvage a good portion of them, right?
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of stuff.
As long as they're not in his enemy's hands. Sure, they're not in my hands, but at least they're not in the people.
Well, like you said, Gordrak went into the crawling tomb, found the skull, put it on a battering ram, and is now going to go. I mean, he could take out the mausoleum, the great necropolis or whatever, all on his own now.
Too true.
Yeah, it's just the balance of power now can shift from anywhere to anywhere at a moment's notice of these Stormvaults.
Dear listener, the power is now in your hands.
Yes.
It was once forbidden, but now it's available to everyone.
Yeah.
On the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's really cool. All right, let's get to some listener questions. Scrubbian Wells wants to know about Teclis.
Hi, Tyler.
And he wants to dedicate this question to Alex Gonzalez.
Oh man!
What can I dedicate it to Chuck too?
No.
That's not what he asked. So I got to dedicate it to Alex G.
I mean, can we bring back the feeling of dedicating a song on the radio to somebody else who's listening to the same radio station?
I mean,
let's bring that back.
I would love if we did that. Yeah.
Let's make that a thing. When you ask questions, dedicate it to somebody in the community. So
all right, Delilah.
So in this case, Alex Gonzalez, he's shouting out to you from Tyler. Here's the question.
He just wants to know about Teclis. So Teclis, honestly, I mean, he's an aloof jerk and has no social skills. So there's that. But I don't even know that he came from a good place by giving the Enlightenment engine. So I don't know that he comes out of this whole situation clean. Like he thinks he does, but I don't know that the rest of us thinks he does.
So there's certainly an aspect of if. Backhanded compliment aside, if I can make my allies a bit better, that makes it better for all of us, right? So I do think that there's an element of the gift, regardless of his attitude, that could have been really good for everybody in the allies in the Pantheon to be like, okay, let's all elevate our. It's it's sharing technology, right? If we can all build better ships, we can we'll do this together. But he says, and Teclis is a book nerd, right? He's an academic. He's a wizard, but then Sigmar is using. So Sigmar is using that as a blunt instrument instead of sharpening his pantheon, right? There is a take there where I think Teclis was doing something that could have helped the pantheon, and Sigmar was super selfish about it.
Sure. Counterpoint, all Teclis' fault. Keep that nonsense to yourself, nerd.
Well, counterpoint, right? Like, penumbral engines require the soul or the soul stuff of something to power them, right? Did Enlightenment engines require soul stuff as well?
No.
Why not? We don't know. This is the thing.
No, it tells you that as it gave, it also took, and it was a self-perpetuating. It was like
Torrents?
renewable energy.
But but what was it taking? What was it
everything.
taking from Sigmar civilization? There's a question here, right? Like, he's
So
like,
you're
I'm going to
saying-
give you this good thing. But he wasn't actually actively, he didn't have a ton of elves to actively campaign. We don't hear about Teclis actually campaigning with Sigmar. We just hear about the Pantheon. So none of the gifts that have been given in the Age of Myth were given without some price being paid.
Sure, but are you saying that these Enlightenment engines stole things?
We don't know.
Well, I mean,
It's-
Teclis would not care for a human soul.
But he could care for something else. It's not necessarily soul. It might be knowledge. It might be energy, right?
So it could. I mean, it's it certainly could be like GPS nodes or trying to think of an analogy now where things that's like a smart speaker
Oh, wait
where
a
it
minute.
listens, right?
What if, all right, what if Enlightenment engines were Teclis's attempt to steal souls for the Deepkin before they turned on him?
All right, Dr. Hank at Trim Hank wants us to name one thing that Teclis has done that hasn't backfired. And personally, I don't know that thing exists.
He's got golden boys.
He
got
was
gold
born,
ones. He was born, yeah, and that really turned out
And-
pretty poorly for
and
everyone.
Tyrion was born too, so that didn't really backfire.
Yeah, I
Tyrion's
mean,
blind now, so.
thanks, brother.
Yeah, Hank, I don't think there's a good answer to that question.
Nothing.
He also wants to know more about the clockwork automatons. I don't know that it really goes into the clockwork automatons. Other than they're just sort of a defensive mechanism for some of these Stormvaults, like the one I talked about. But the fact that they keep getting brought up makes me think that that they might end up being a real thing down the line.
For example, they were brought up in Shadespire, right? They talk about these automatons. They talk about these vaults with traps with treasures inside of them,
Sure.
right? Which was one of the things that happened in Shadespire, right? And so this is a thing. We do have these Eternal Guardians, these arcane constructs.
When we were in Azir, I think in Soul Wars, there was a bunch of clockwork automatons there too.
Well, there's tons of. I mean, the Clockwork Cities and
Cogforts.
and stuff like this. There's so much of this stuff. It feels like in the next 5 years we have to have
I was
something
gonna say,
like
it has to come to fruition in some way.
The other thing we see it in terms of in
Josh Reynolds.
Hamilcar, we come up against Skaven that have a clockwork. Storm vermin basically that operate kind of like wind up toys and have a set kind of whirling dance and stuff. So, that technology exists
True.
over the lore.
Dylan at Dylan KW wants to know who
Dedicated to
dedicated to you, Eric.
Oh,
Still
okay.
monkey. No, I didn't. Wants to know who worships Lauchan the Soul Seeker and what would a custom faction of his followers look like. I don't think we're really talking. He used to be like a fragment of a god or something like that.
Well, he's a ferryman.
Sure, no, but I think they mentioned that he was like
Yeah.
or he is currently now a fraction of a god that used to exist. But yes, he's very what is it, Charon from
Charon, yeah.
Charon, yeah.
He's the CEO of Uber.
Sure, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So what would an army maybe we would have a race or an army of skeleton Greeks as opposed to skeleton Egyptians, which were the Tumkins, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, those would probably look kind of similar now that I think about it. But a Greek
Togas.
themed a skeleton army is what I would think in terms of a faction that would follow him.
That'd be so Jason and the Argonauts would love it. Like the old stop claymation and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That'd be amazing. To
Well,
play homage to that.
I could also see it being some kind of a ogre pre being chased by the Eternal Winter, right? Like just constantly moving, constantly ferrying things from one place to another, right? Like that being the afterlife that they chose.
Bone truckers.
That's right.
That's ferrying.
No, I do like.
That was dumb.
I mean, they are huge. I don't know. I can't remember. I haven't opened or I haven't taken a look at mine next to an ogre if they're the same size. as an ogre.
The skeleton doesn't quite match.
Okay.
But yeah, it is an interesting. So I don't know because it's what the afterlife is. It's not necessarily what the life was of that thing. It's just that was the afterlife that they thought that they deserved. And if we can extrapolate from he steals a soul to take a soul somewhere, right? Like, I mean, they could have been the realm seekers, the realm wanderers, right? Those people who, in the age of myth, went through the realm gates, went and understood all these things. That wouldn't be a terrible,
Yeah.
idea.
Alex Palomeni at Old Stonebeard. What? Are you guys brothers? Stone Monk Gamer? Wants to know how we feel about this as a next and presumably final chapter of Soul Wars. Is this a new evolution of a Realm Gate Wars type saga? Let's tie this in to your answer to this question as well as like a review or what you thought of the book as well. I'll jump into it. First of all, I don't know that I would presume that this is the final chapter of the Soul Wars. I think this had a very clear, maybe not cliffhanger, but like continuation that it wanted to continue. So maybe it's not part of like the Soul Wars. Like
It made
ethos.
something so important and then did not answer it completely that it seems like there's something left to say.
Sure, which I wouldn't guarantee they're going to say something about it because this is GW, so who the heck knows what they're going to do?
Well, yeah, I mean, Lady Orlinder could like smuggle this thing back to someplace else, and we don't hear about it for a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows? But I don't think it's a given to say that it's a final chapter.
No.
How do we feel? Is this in the next presumably final chapter? I do feel a little bit let down that I don't know what's inside that vault. I wish I would have gotten to some conclusion.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it got me real
They
good.
gotcha.
Dubs. Honestly, I would have bought it regardless, so it had no bearing on that. So I do feel a little let down. It seemed like a way to really just sell a box of...
I think, to me, it's a layer of Age of Sigmar that the concept of the Stormvaults takes a fantasy trope and blows it up in the dungeon in the dungeon crawl type of thing.
That's actually how I solve all my dungeons, is I blow them up.
Yep. Fireball. So there's in carving out a space in our fantasy games, toys, whatever. They've certainly created this thing that's uniquely.
They're miniatures, Eric, not toys.
They created something that's uniquely Age of Sigmar, a Age of Sigmar take on something, a trope. It for me has created a space to think about. I mean, like when you think about the Gibbering Dome, like of course there's a storm vault there, right? When you think about like there's just when we think about Age of Sigmar roleplay, we're like, of course we're going to go into a storm vault at some point. The same way you're thinking, of course we're going to go through a realm gate at some point. The same time way you're thinking, of course we're going to go to the crawling city at some point. Like there's so many things that become iconic, and like this is, to me, it's an instant like essential / classic of Age of Sigmar now.
Yeah.
And it's done. I think it's done really well in terms of how it fits. And at first, as I was like starting to get into this, I was like, well, why didn't he use one of these things to like end the Age of Chaos? Like, why didn't he rip something open sooner? And I think the Penumbral Engines do a good job of just explaining like he just forgot about them, like they were erased. Like, yeah. So I feel like there's enough like corners tacked up or whatever. Like it has enough holding it up that it's fun.
Sure. You know how in 8th Fantasy where they would come out with new units and people would complain like, well, why didn't they always have demigryphs? Like, why did they just show up? Well, I like how they're going to have to continually get real creative with the Moral Realms and come up with reasons why something didn't always exist. And so like Penumbral Engines is an example of like, man, how do we explain this away? Engines that made you forget about them. Like, what's the next thing that like excuses? Yeah.
Well, and that was one of the other
masking
things.
a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
Is when they mentioned that they were like, not only are the Penumbral Engines hiding storm vaults, they're hiding other things too, right? Like they're hiding races, they're hiding people. Like,
Sure,
people knew about these before
Yeah.
before now. So I'm wondering if the entity that was in the Stormvault is the way that Death is going to be able to steal souls now. Because Death doesn't actually steal souls yet. They're the loser
they have
in
to
this
wait.
war, right?
They're last in line currently.
Exactly. So what if this is an offensive being that can now go out and steal souls for Death?
Sure.
That would be a super interesting way of
Which could
moving
also be an
the
angle
Soul Wars
to
forward.
like a new Soulblight thing. Is
Exactly.
stealing souls back. Man, I like that as an idea,
So-
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as the book is concerned and the box set, like I think it's amazing because it really embodies to me. I think in this box set they've gotten the idea of this is the way to do 3 ways to play.
Yeah.
Right? Because for open play, they've added Stormvaults, right? They have miniatures for it, they have terrain, they have all this stuff to make your battlefields look cooler, to just have things to look cool on the table, to give you things to fight over. Narratively, they have just opened up every place in the realms to be someplace where an epic thing can happen and epic things can be waiting for you, right? And from a match play perspective, giving these different spells that allow so much movement, they've really changed around the way that the meta is based on this specific thing or that specific thing. So some people have more tools, some people have less tools, but everybody can now have a tool to allow them to move their armies across the board, right? And so with this one box set, they've actually changed all 3 ways to play.
Yeah. Which
And
I think is a good call for an expansion to have something for everybody.
Yeah.
And do you feel like Aaron that as a collector or as like in the lore that they've given us enough here for like it's not Soul Wars where they've I like the question in terms of it's not like it's still in Soul Wars, like Soul Wars set off a new kind of chapter, whereas Forbidden Power kind of is like, all right, here's a new element or here's a new thing to just like pour your head into for a while in terms of like where possibilities are. Does that do enough for you?
And you guys, you're winning me over actually. And if you were to take it very literally, like what does an expansion do? That's what it did. It expanded the game. But we didn't really even talk about like the mercenary rules that I think I don't know if it has something to do with also what was in the GHB as well. But that whole component to it. But
or the artifacts too.
Yeah, also true. But like it very much is an expansion, even from the lore perspective, in that it's not a fundamental core product, but it's an expansion of what was already what had come out before. And if you look at it from that perspective, it does make me feel better about it.
And it's previewing, so the GHB coming out, now just a month later or a few weeks later has even more of these mercenaries that groups you can take and how you can take them. And for me, I mean, I was already just in my lore like coming up with ways like why wouldn't my sky elves and some pirate dwarves and some man-eater ogres, why wouldn't they sometimes work together? And this gives me all those options to put them on the table without. I guess I don't mind asking permission. I've never had issue asking permission or getting permission.
Oh, we know.
It's better. Sometimes I prefer that than asking forgiveness personally.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's just kind of like, I don't have to wonder if I get to put things on the table.
Sure.
Well, and Vince and Tom likes to talk about a gold faction, right? Like a faction that can be in any or more than one alliance, right? We didn't get a faction, but we got mercenary companies that are gold factions. They can go in any army. You can use them for any reason. And that's super cool because it is fulfilling something that people do really want to do, right? If you want to add a narratively, if you want to add fish to your courts, great. If you think they add a lot of balance to your army, great. There's a trade-off, but you can do that now, right? And it also narratively provides a really cool way of theming those armies together, right? Like if you had a free people army and then the flesh eater courts that think that they're also these knightly order, it's a ton of stuff.
Yeah. And now you got 2 armies and they're going to build those out.
Aw, shucks, they got me.
That's so weird. So weird how that happened.
Got me again, G-dubs.
That was one of my favorite seasons in terms of other games where Armageddon for 40K, when that came out, it was like, oh, I can just buy a few boxes of this and have some fun. Like it's just one of those things that gives you permission to buy something that you've wanted to and not feel like you're committing to a whole army, right? So that's always cool for me.
Too true. So that sounds like we're pretty positive on this guy. Any other final thoughts, parting gifts to our dear listeners?
I think there's a ton that is going to be revealed based on this, right? Like, the Necroquake didn't necessarily feel like there was a ton happening. That felt like a big plot point. And it was a cool narrative build-up and a cool narrative exploration. And then we got malign sorcery out of it, which kind of... The Necroquake kind of felt like it provided a match play reason for having malign sorcery. But like I said, this seems to tie it all back in together to move everything forward from here, right? Number one, the fact that we have actual mix and match AOS terrain is awesome, right? And that's not specifically in the book, but it's introduced and expanded upon in this background. And that's just super cool. One of the other things is that they have this idea of kind of the shifting objective where you have to light the torches and stuff like that. So I think it's successful in changing the way you look at the game, but giving you the tools to play the game in a different way as well.
I think as they're mapping and defining the realm gate or the mortal realms, which were previously like the unknown, could be anything. I think as they map it and define, the Stormvaults become the new like could be anything,
discoverable.
And again, it's one of my favorite parts about AOS is that there's if you're going to start coloring in some spaces, you need to create some more lines that aren't colored in so that other people can color them in. So this is, to me, it's creative freedom. So
cool. I think that will do it. Let's call it a day.
But it's nighttime.
Let's call it a night.
Okay. Then it's time for our reforging. But Sigmar willing, we'll be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. Where can we find you guys?
Yeah, and you can find me at Dos Asos.
You can find me at PJ Shard.
And you can find me at Stone Monk Gamer. You can listen to more episodes of the story phase, campaign phase, scrying phase, and what the hex, as well as hobby content at www.themortalrealms.com.
Like, the only wing I'm concerned about is the chicken wing.
We already did our intros.
God damn it. But, oh god, I had an additional thought about him and the guy. Nope, I lost it. It's gone forever.
Sorry.
That's getting cut too.
Penumbral Engine.
Penumbral Engine. Man.
You forgot to turn it off.
Get it out of here.
Yeah, turn that off.
Turn it off.